Guys, join me. Hi, this is Mr. Pinto. We have had a morning, haven't we, boys and girls, behind me? We have done this now not once, not twice, but three times. We've tried to record. Great idea, Mr. Pinto has. Boys and girls is a life skill called perseverance where you don't give up. And we've tried three different times. Something about Screencastify on your desktop, your laptop, and it's kind of fast and glitchy. And so I've talked to Mrs. Vitale and Mr. Lowmeyer and tech, and we're trying to get it figured out. But it's been a day, and we've messed up. Please don't do that with your fingers. We're not showing signs. We're not being cool. We're just being normal second graders and first graders and third graders. All right. So we're going to do Book of Excellence yet again. I've got my stress ball, right, boys and girls? Mm-hmm. This is because we've done this now 4 times, right? And it's like not working. So what we're going to do is going to start with the joke. So who's my first jokester? All right. First of all, introduce yourself. Take a sucker out of your mouth. I've been bribing these kids with suckers, whatever. Lay it on me.
My name's Turner Mosley.
Louder.
My name's Turner Mosley, and my teacher is Miss Oakley.
Okay, got a joke for me today, Turner?
Yo, what's a bear's favorite candy?
What's a bear's favorite candy? Honeycombs. That's cereal. I don't know. What is it?
Gummy bears.
Gummy bears. All right, the good one. Thanks. All right, here's our first page of Book of Excellences. Josie Applebaum for effort for Mrs. Early and Layla Leone for personal best. Jack Wolf for problem solving for Mrs. Harris. Fermi Munoz for problem solving for Mrs. Harris, and also for Mrs. Uckman in speech. We have Olivia Dutton for effort for Mrs. Storms, and Emmett Powell for effort for Mrs. Ferger, and Layla Richards for Mrs. Ferger for effort as well. Way to go. Miles Gardner for kindness. Thank you, Mrs. Oakley, and Brewer Stroud for personal best for Mrs. Uckman. Baylor Beck for effort from Mrs. Sheets and Mrs. Storms. Bella Lewandowski for personal best for Mrs. Sheets, and again for personal best. Nova Allen for Mrs. Storms for effort, as well as Allie Burnett for effort for Mrs. Storms, Kendall Downell for problem solving, and Josie Holt for Mrs. Harris for problem solving. Presley Hallis for Mrs. Sheets for personal best. Don't you just love all the things in the background? You're on candid camera, Zoe, so just remember that, all right? Yeah. Okay. Presley Hallis for personal best. Malin Russell for personal best for Mrs. Sheets. Baylor Beck for effort for Mrs. Sheets and Mrs. Storms. Meadow Wilkinson for personal best, and Scout Peabody for personal best for Mrs. Sheets. Maddie Burton for personal best, and Hayden Rogers for Mrs. Sheets for personal best. A lot of personal best. Navalia Santiago Garcia for personal best for Mrs. Sheets twice. Cody Badeston for effort, and Abigail Burnett for effort for Mrs. Storms and Mrs. Gardner. Gabe Perrette for Mrs. Storms for effort, and Eli Capecci, he mastered his language goal for Mrs. Harris and Mrs. Uckman. Mary Gardner for personal best, and Mary Gardner again for Mrs. Early for personal best. Kale Barr for respect, and for Mrs. Lord, and Maddie Lowry for personal best, and Mia Snyder for effort and perseverance from her teacher. All right, next jokester. Who's next?
Knock, knock.
Bro, get over here if we can see you. Scoot over the other way. There you go. Introduce yourself.
My name's Justin Garrett, and my teacher is Miss Riker.
Okay, lay it on me.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting. You interrupted me. You're interrupting cow, right? Good one, Justin. All right, good job. All right, back to the Book of Excellence. Cooper Baisden for effort from Mrs. Early, and Sophia Mendez from Mrs. Elam for effort, as well as Kinsley Cooper for kindness. Kinsley Ferris from Mrs. Elam for effort twice, and Bo Burgess and Emma Coleman for effort from Mrs. Elam. Emma Coleman for effort twice from Mrs. Elam and Mrs. Storms. Maddie Fouch for effort from Mrs. Elam, and Sadie Trader for effort from Mrs. Sheets. Sam Vaughn, not once but twice for effort from Mrs. Sheets. And Drew Jansing for personal best, not once but twice. Rowan Guesswine for effort, and Chris, I can't even read my writing. Jenkins for problem solving twice for Mrs. Sheets. Lincoln Kessler for effort for Mrs. Storms and Mrs. Sheets. Owen Disher, gentlemen, ladies, I can hear it. Shh. Davina Paget for personal best, and Davina Paget for personal best again from Mrs. Sheets. All right, next joke. Come on up, my friend.
Hi, my name is Zoe Edwards.
We'll get over here so you can see us.
Hi, my name is Zoe Edwards, and I'm in Mrs. Max's.
Lay it on us, Zoe.
How do shells say selfish?
How do shells say selfish? I don't know.
Shellfish.
They say shellfish. I got it. Good one. Eric Vaught for effort from Mrs. Harris. Avery Bachman from Mrs. Harris. Layla Leone for doing the right thing from Mrs. Harris, and Lincoln Foley. Huxley Scott Spears for initiative and problem solving from Mrs. Harris. Bailey Sainer for problem solving from Mrs. Tilley, and Paxton Colbreth for friendship. Joe Vo for effort. Great name, Joe Vo from Mrs. Storms, and for cooperation and patience from Mrs. Reichert. Layla Richards for effort from Mrs. Storms, and Cora Cochran for working hard for Mrs. Uckman. Leyland Fuller for kindness from Mrs. Burke. Kaiser Russell for effort. Noah George for perseverance. William Solis for effort from Mrs. Oakley, and Layla Leone for effort, and Mary Gardner for effort from Mrs. Early, and Gabby Bice for effort from Mrs. Early, and Gabby Bice for effort from Mrs. Early and Mrs. Storm. Great job. Last jokester. Daniel, stop. Lay it on me.
How do sheep reply after hearing I love you?
How does sheep reply after hearing I love you? I don't know.
You're not so bad.
You're not so bad yourself. Great one for Valentine's Day coming up. Boys and girls, great job on your life skills, personal best. Lots of personal best and lots of effort, but a lot of other ones as well. Life Skills Matter at Cole Elementary. This Book of Excellence is an amazing tribute to everyone who does the right thing, and the teachers represented as well. So thank you so much. Let's have a great day. Maybe your name will be read the next